All right, welcome back. Today we're going to tackle part 4. It's kind of going to be a long one. And we're going to start off right here in the global adjustments with effects. So if you open up effects, we can increase the texture or decrease the texture. We can increase clarity or decrease clarity. Clarity increases your mid-tone contrast. So if you're wondering what that does, so if you want to dehaze your image, you can go to the right. If you want to make more haze, go to your left. We can add a vignette. So vignette dark to the left. So we're making a dark vignette. Go to the right, you'll make a white vignette. All right, so off on the right-hand side, you see we have these little triangles, and there's one next to vignette. If any item that you see here, and Grain has one as well, has a triangle, you can click it. And if you click it, that means there's other stuff underneath that you can do. So this one, we can do the vignette. So we'll go ahead and I'll make it really dark so you can see it. Then we can control the aspects of that vignette with these items underneath that triangle. We can move the midpoint in and we can move the midpoint out. We can make it more round or more square, depending on what we want. We can soften that feather or make the feather harder. And we can adjust our highlights. Just like in vignette, we also have grain, and we can add grain to our image. We can control the grain size and roughness in the image. That is effects. All right, so the next thing that we have here is the curve section. I'll go ahead and open this up. And we have 2 different types of curves. And so one thing you should know about using curves is that the curves don't have anything different than you have up here in light. So these adjustments here are basically adjusting your curve or a curve, just like you would if you did this here. Now, if you've used Photoshop, using the curve might be easier. If we come up here, we'll see these little lines. This is what we call the parametric curve. And so the parametric curve has been made to sort of simplify the process. So the way the curves works is this little thing that we see here is our histogram, just like this. It's where the data is. This is our shadow side. This is our highlights. And this is the midtones inside of that histogram. So to use the parametric curve, you're going to select that little icon, and then we're going to come here, and we're going to left click and hold and drag up, and you kind of have to drag up hard. And what it tries to do, lift up in the area and then take the curve back down. So what that means is this area is getting brightened, but it didn't affect the highlights. And so if we Command Z that, if I do that in the highlights to make them darker, it's doing the same thing. This area, it's darkening, and then the curve's automatically going back up like this. Now, if you get rid of the parametric curve and you don't use that, so we're going to go ahead and reset the curve, and I'm going to click on this little icon. This is the point curve. So the point curve uses a series of points. And so up here is our top point, and then there's a bottom one here, and then we can add ones in the middle. But if we go this way, it increases our highlights. If we go down, it darkens our highlights. If you come here, it makes your image flatter. It's lowering the contrast. This way, it's increasing the contrast and making your black point darker. If you come in the center, this is the mid-tone area, and you go up, which is at a 45-degree angle this way, it brightens your image, down darkens your image. If you need to get rid of that point, you just hit delete. The way this works is in this image, maybe I don't need to darken the sky, but these areas in the shadows, I want to brighten. Now, normally I would do a selective adjustment to do this, but I'm just going to show you this way. So I'm going to come down here in the shadows and I'm going to lift up. But if I don't want to affect the highlights and make them any brighter, I can come set a second point and drag them back down. If you imagine an imaginary line, and you see this in Photoshop, it's a little black line that goes at a diagonal. That's the normal point of where the curve originally was. So in this case, the highlights aren't getting affected. Then we get into the midtones, they're getting brightened. So the way this curve works is highlights aren't getting affected. Then right here in the midtones, they start to get brightened, and then down into the shadows and down in here. So that curve is doing that. To see that, you just click and hold. That's kind of before, and that's after. Doesn't look so great normally, I would do a different curve for this. I would increase my highlights. I can show you on this curve, just don't pay attention to the sky, just look down here. So I'm going to slide the highlights over and notice the histogram starts right about here. That's about where I'm going to slide that line to. It's optimizing the histogram. I'm going to brighten those highlights, and then I'm just going to give it a little kick of contrast. And so you can see how much better that area looks. If I click on that and go, yeah, that looks better. Now, brighten this up. That's why you would do this in a selective adjustment. But we don't have this in selective adjustments. We would need to use this in selective adjustments, which really doesn't matter because it's doing the exact same thing. So our next item down here is Color Mixer. And Color Mixer has 3 different ways to work with it. They all do the exact same thing. I have one that I prefer the most, and that's the one that I use. So there's no reason to learn all 3 variations. Just pick one and use it. So I'll show you how Color Mixer works and what it does. I've picked this image here just because it's completely oversaturated. Now, normally I would fix the color by adjusting the white balance. I'd come in here, do something. Yeah, that's a lot better. Okay, but we're just going to leave it as shot so you can see what's going on here. And we're going to go back down to Color Mixer. So in Color Mixer SL, we have the hue, the saturation, the luminance, and all. So hue means we're working with the hues in these colors. And hue means you're adjusting the color of the color, which is a little weird, but you'll see here. Saturation, the intensity of the color, or no color at all. And then brightness of the color. All just means you get the hue, the saturation. You guys can't see the luminance one because it's covered up. But we're going to start here. So we've got a ton of yellow in this image. So we're going to go to yellow. So if I'm in hue, I can change the color of yellow by adjusting this. And that's what I mean, changing the color of a color. And you would be surprised how helpful this is in photography. The downfall is this is a global adjustment, so it has to work everywhere and look good. Look, Photoshop has this exact same thing basically, and you can selectively apply it to areas. So a lot of times, if I need to selectively apply this, I just wait until I get into Adobe Photoshop. So hues, adjusting the color. Saturation, so yellow will make it more intense, or black and white. And so in this case, it could be helpful because we can reduce the amount of that yellow in the image. Luminance, we can make the yellows brighter or darker by adjusting that. And so the options we get here are just to be working in the hues, the saturation, and on. It all gives us all of them down. But truthfully, if you switch over to color, it's a lot easier. So you pick the color you want to work in. So we'll pick yellow, and there's hue, there's saturation, and there's luminance. Works the same. We just have to pick the color that we want first and then work in that color. So that is working with Color Mixer. Next, let's go down to color grading. And before we do the color grading, I think so this makes a lot more sense and is easier to see. We're going to switch this image to black and white, and guess what? It looks a million times better because it gets rid of that nasty color. Color grading is something that you've most likely seen in movies. So if you are watching a movie and it's a love scene, it might be warm and they might have toned the image warm. However, if you're in a scary movie, maybe it's green or blue, all right? So you're changing the color to change the emotion of the image. We can do color grading either Adobe Camera Raw. I actually prefer in Photoshop using gradient maps just because I have a whole lot more control. But you can do it here and it works really well. Just like in the color mixer that we saw before, we have a couple different ways to look at it, but they all do the same thing. So the first icon gives us all the sliders. So it's got midtones, shadows, and highlights. I really only adjust for the shadows and the highlights. I don't like putting another color in the midtones. Or we can just see the shadow slider, just the midtone slider, the highlight slider. Or we can use a global slider. And what that means is it's going to be one color. So whatever you add to it, it's like a monochromatic thing, like sepia toning your image. You just move that color, everything turns that color. In this case, we don't want to do that, so we're going to Command Z it. And we're going to go back to all three. It's just easier for me to do that. So we're going to go into the shadows and add some blue. And I don't want an intense blue, so we'll go there. And then we're going to do like a yellowish orange for the highlights. This is a normal color grading split tones. This is what we call a split tone, meaning there are two. Notice I'm not using the midtones. So blending, we can control how much of where. So I'm sliding this slider and controlling. So do we want more of the highlight color or more of the shadow color? And then we can control the balance of it, like where it starts to cross over. So maybe we want to do that, all right? And that's how you do color grading in Adobe Camera Raw. If you want to see the before and after, there you go. We have detail. Detail is easy. Sharpening. Do not use sharpening in Adobe Camera Raw. Why? Really easy question. First of all, sharpening is not going to make an out of focus image become in focus. You need AI. Like Topaz is really good at doing that. This is not something you're going to get out of unsharp mask or sharpening in this program. What sharpening does is it increases edge contrast and it gives the appearance that the image is sharper. The problem is you don't want to sharpen until you've toned your image and sized it, because the amount of sharpening is dependent on the final image size. So let's say you did this full resolution, you might sharpen your image, let's say at 60%. But if you do a 1500 pixel image, you might only want to sharpen it 20%. If you did that 60, it would be way over sharpened and it would look horrible. So I don't do sharpening in Adobe Camera Raw. Below that, we have denoise, and we learned what denoise was in the last video. This is just a quick way to get to it and a different way to get to it than going up here and going to enhance. Now, the trick here is not all images are shot raw. In some cases, you're going to need to use manual noise removal. And it's really easy. You just slide the luminance slider. I don't even bother with the other ones. I just slide it over and it will simply remove the noise. It doesn't do it as good as denoise, but I've been using it for years and it works pretty well. Our next option is optics, and I have that open and I have it selected for profile. And so if we come in here and we click this little button right here that says use profile collections, what it does is it looks at the metadata and tries to figure out what camera and what lens was used, and then it's going to apply some settings to correct for the different optic issues that are associated with each lens. So in this case, we can turn it on and turn it off, and you can see it changing as we do that. If for some reason the metadata is gone or not associated with the image, it's not going to show up as anything. So then your other option is to go ahead and turn that off, and we can simply come in here and manually adjust this. We can come in here and change the distortion in the vignette in the midpoint of that image. And so that's manual and profile under optics. Now, you can't see this. I'm going to close this so it comes up higher, but we have the fringe. And I'll probably move the fringe as a little screenshot over here to the left so you can see it. But what this does is get rid of chromatic aberration that you sometimes see in photos. Let me zoom in really far in here. And if you see this kind of purpley magenta stuff, that's what we're talking about. So if we want to remove that, we can come in here and start to adjust. So if you wanted to manually, you could also use this little pointer and click it, and we can come in here and try to find, I don't got the pointer anymore, kind of that purplish color. I'll click there and you can see, wow, it did a really good job of removing that chromatic aberration and that kind of funky colors that you get in an image. So that is defringing the image. All right, so let's finish this out quickly. So up here, we've got our crop tool, and inside the crop tool, there's actually two different options. One is going to be your crop, and that's going to allow you to come in here and just resize what you see in the image. You can do this a variety of ways. So there's some presets. So we can do full, meaning we can do the full adjustments. We can change it to 1:1. And what these are doing is changing your ratio. They're not sizing your image, they're just changing the ratios. And these are the different ratios that you could use. So for right now, we'll just use full, and you can come in here and change that. Now, it is locking in the ratio that your image was shot in. Notice the locked. So if we want to unlock that, we can come over here to this little lock icon and unlock it. And that's going to allow us to do like any sort of weird crop. So we're not locking in that aspect ratio that we saw before. Notice that when you grab this point, it's moving the top and the right side in. Come down here, you can grab this corner and drag that in. You can grab this corner and drag that in. You can also hold the Alt or Option key. So Option on a Mac, most likely Alt on a PC. Left click and drag, and it does it evenly from all four sides. So all four sides come in evenly. So we are still unlocked, as you can see over here. And if I hold the Shift key down, it's going to lock that ratio again. Okay. Now, if I let go of the Shift key, I can do any sort of ratio. So Shift will lock in your ratio. If you want to rotate your image, if you go out, you see how the arrow changes. Left click and hold, and it will allow you to rotate your image. You can also come in here and rotate this way. You can rotate 90 degrees this way, flip it horizontal, vertical, anything that you want. All right. You can also grab the level and find something that's straight. Use this and draw a straight line, and it will try to level it. All right. If you do this and do it crooked, it will do it, but it's going to level it to how you drew that line. Command Z to go back. Hit escape to get rid of it. So I'll click back on that crop tool. And so that's crop. So we've got ratios. Remember, this is not resizing your image. It's just changing the ratio. Below that, we have geometry. And geometry used to be one of the tabs out, and they hid it inside this, and it's really irritated a lot of people. And geometry is going to help fix that parallax that we were talking about earlier. And I think it works a little bit better. Up here, we have some presets. So this first preset that looks like an A is going to do that where it tries to straighten or level it out. Does it do it perfect? No. All right. The next one is going to try to level the image. So if it was crooked, it would try to level it. This one is going to try to change the vertical appearance. This is going to do horizontal and vertical perspective adjustments. And this is for guided. And in guided, you need to customize and do the lines here. So I'm going to put a line right there, and then I'll put a line, or I could put a line there. All right. So it's trying to adjust this and that to make it straight. Now, did it work? No. So we're going to undo that. Those are just presets, and they don't always work. I actually prefer the manual way most of the time, so I can come in here and just manually do some of these adjustments that I want. So if I want to shift it horizontal, go that way. If I want to rotate the image, I can rotate the image. If I want to change the aspect ratio, I can do that. Scale, offset, that Y. All right. So that is how you use geometry. Both optics and geometry are also available in Adobe Photoshop. So if you want to use them there, you can wait. It really is just dependent on up to you. I don't shoot a lot of architecture, so this isn't something generally that I use a lot. And we'll just leave this all messed up like that. And we're going to slide down here. And what we have, and our next option are cloning in the new remove tool. So the remove tool uses AI, and basically, so let me come on down here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to simply paint over that person. Once I've done selecting that, I can come up here, hit apply, and boom, it's going to remove them from the image, and it should do it pretty good. Now, I don't use any of these options inside of Adobe Camera Raw because I do it inside of Photoshop because I can make it non-destructive. So I can remove this, and if I don't like it later on, I can just turn that off and the person appears. As you can see over here on the left-hand side, the people are gone and it was easy to remove. So we can come on over here to the Band-Aid. The Band-Aid is doing the same thing. So I can paint over an area, then it's just going to remove that, and that's using Content Aware. Right here is a clone stamp, so it's going to clone one thing from one area to another. So if I want to get rid of that little bush, I can select that. It's saying, hey, we're going to take this area and replace the bush with this area so it looks like it's gone. And to get rid of those weird symbols, you just click on it and you can see it made the ground even, so it didn't work so good. But that's basically how the cloning works. Right here we have red eye reduction. But if you do have red eye reduction and you need to remove red eyes, you can see it's happening up there in the top left-hand corner. You just make little selections and it does its best. We have snapshots. So I should have done a snapshot on this one, but if we click on this, the way snapshots work are you're basically making adjustments in an image. If I put a snapshot when I started, we'll just make this first. I'll call this and hit OK. So it's going to take that in time. And then if I come up here and I start doing things to it, and we'll do this and this. Okay. And then I can take another snapshot. So we'll click on this new snapshot and we'll call this 2. I can go back in time. It's like a history. So if I'm like, man, I don't like what I did here, let me go back in time. I can just click. But then if I say, you know what, I did like it, I'll click that and go to that. So if you're doing something complicated, which I don't do in Adobe Camera Raw, it'll let you go back in time that you purposely set. Down here, we have the presets. So in presets, they've got 1 billion. So we've reset the image, and presets do exactly what you think. So this is adaptive. So we'll go dark drama. So you can see it made dark drama in the sky. Now, with the adaptive ones, you can control how much of that happens. You're controlling how much do you want? Do you want more of it or do you want less of it? That's when you see something adaptive. That's what an adaptive preset does. Then we also just have regular presets. You just click on them and you go here. Now, presets aren't doing anything special. They're just using adjustments that we see up here. If you do a preset, and look, presets work great for one image, but then not the other image. You need to know how to modify them. So what happened in the spring? What did it do? You need to go in there so that you can adjust it so it looks better, okay? So we need to come in here and adjust some of these sliders to manipulate it so it looks how we want it to look. You can also make a whole bunch of different adjustments or color grading and stuff like that. And then you can go into those presets and you can create your own. So you would just come up here to the little paper icon, click that, and you're going to say, hey, I want to create preset. Anything that's checked, it's going to add to the preset. Anything that's unchecked, it's not going to be. So if you did something, but you didn't want the detail in it, you would just click that and you could make your own presets. All right. You can also import presets that other people have. So I don't really cover presets in this because they're just kind of like a one-click and done thing. I'm trying to teach you how to use the program. Eventually, once you use it, and if you find the presets useful, go ahead and do them. I don't use presets in Adobe Camera Raw. I use something called Actions in Photoshop. They're doing the same thing in a different way. So once we get into Photoshop, you'll see what I'm doing in Actions and it will make more sense. That's it. We have completely covered everything inside of Adobe Camera Raw and we're done. I'm so happy. I'm sorry this is a long video, but it's an expansive program. Just Don't forget, this is a new channel. If you could give us a thumbs up, that would be great. Comments or questions, you can leave those in the comments below, or you can go over to Facebook to Shutterbug Academy and you can leave comments with images or videos there. Sometimes with the more complicated questions, that can be helpful. If you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to subscribe, share with your friends, and have an absolutely wonderful day.